Come gather round, people, wherever you roam, and admit that the waters around you have grown, and accept it that soon you'll be drenched to the bone. If your time to you is worth saving, then you better start swimming, or you'll sink like a stone, for the times they are a-changing.
Welcome to the Watchmen for Nixon podcast. I'm Joe.
I'm Garrett.
And this episode we will be reviewing and discussing, as always, Watchmen Season 1, Episode 6, This Extraordinary Being. This episode turned out to be quite a reveal, I would say, Garrett. What are your first thoughts on this one?
Well, quick question. Should we be calling it Season 1 anymore if we don't know if there's going to be a Season 2?
I guess, yeah, that's true. I do intro each time prefacing with Season 1, but I don't know. We don't have confirmation on that
No,
yet,
we don't. We have confirmation on quite a few things in this episode, which we'll deep dive in. And I will say this. I don't know if any other show, I guess the only other show we really covered in long form was probably the last season of Game of Thrones on the Aliens and Cowboys podcast. And we theorized on some stuff. I don't know if we were correct on a lot of it. I feel like this show, though, we are hitting our stride. We are hitting marks. And we are, I would say this, when we're thinking about things, we're in the right spot. Because most importantly, the Hooded Justice thing with Will Reeves, correct, right? We called that like 3 episodes ago, maybe.
Yeah, quite a while
so
back.
like that was pretty good. But I was the most proud of saying not jumping to conclusions with the Judd Crawford thing, because his exact argument was that is his grandfather's robe, and that was my viewpoint on this. That maybe there's a side story here. There's a small probability that it's not actually him. Now I want to talk about that a little bit later, because it's not to say he's not a part of it. He's not 100% innocent. It's just that particular robe wasn't his. And I still maintain that he's not a 7th Cavalry member. I think I'm on that side. But digressing here. The episode itself was really interesting. Is this the first bottle episode, do you think?
Yeah, probably.
Or would you think Looking Glass was a bottle episode?
I mean, Looking Glass was a pretty solid bottle episode, but in terms of taking a step back from everything happening in the current day, obviously we get flashbacks in multiple episodes, not just this one. But the fact that this was an extended flashback sequence, that the entirety of the story they were looking to tell was self-contained within that flashback, yeah, I think it's a bottle episode, more or less.
So, I don't want this to be a hot take. I didn't think this episode's not my favorite episode.
Okay.
I thought that the story was really interesting. I thought specifically Will Reeves' story. I like that it kind of draws a line of progression from these vigilante heroes that we know straight all the way back to its beginning. Through the comic book, through 1921 Tulsa race riot.
Yeah. That
this is where Will Reeves became who he was, that leads all the way up to Hooded Justice, leads all the way up to the Minutemen, leads all the way up to Silk Spectre, all the way up to Sister Night, right? And Red Scare and those people. Mm-hmm. I like that we have that background. Now, that being said, I really like the modern day stuff. And I think that my criticism is we don't get we want more of, seeing the silhouettes of all of the Minutemen together makes me wish that we got way more interaction between the Red Scare, Pirate Jenny, because to be fair, Pirate Jenny's even kind of an afterthought. Not very much in this series.
Yeah, so even less so than Red Scare has been up to this point.
Right, it's going to be really disappointing if this turns out to be a one-season show, because Pirate Jenny is kind of not needed. I mean, outside of her holding the shotgun at Laurie Blake and saying, "Who the F are you?" hasn't really had anything to do. Besides fly the Archimedes, right, in the first episode, so not a huge role. I would have to say that I think that, again, bottle episodes. So those are bottle episodes are what they are. Those are just specific looks at specific people or events or time or anything like that. Positive, it's good. Not my favorite.
Okay.
We learned a lot of stuff. I think we still have to ask some questions about a few things.
Yeah.
I'm excited to get into this. This discussion on Hooded Justice within the American hero story, because you and I know that we're on the opposite sides of viewpoints on this.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of excited to hear, and we haven't had this argument yet, so I'm excited to hear your argument play out. But I'm just going off here. What are your thoughts on this episode?
Yeah, overall, I actually really liked this episode quite a lot. It's probably my top 2, I would say. Obviously, as we've discussed, I'm a big Looking Glass fan, so I still think that episode thus far stands out to me most, but this would be a close second if I'm ranking these episodes. What I really enjoyed about it, I actually really liked the noir feel, so the fact that this was all in black and white, I kind of liked that they utilized that for the flashback sequences. What I was somewhat concerned about going into this episode was that I didn't want them to interject too much of the current day with the flashback sequences, and by that I mean there is a moment, probably halfway through, I don't know if it's actually halfway through, it seemed like it, where Laurie Blake is kind of getting through to Angela, and then yes. Cal reads that message to her. That was great placement for it. I was worried that would be a recurring theme throughout, and they'd keep interrupting this flashback with those kind of moments, and very pleased they did not do it. They had kind of the intro, reminded you of what nostalgia was and why it was very dangerous that Angela took that nostalgia, but then outside of that, it was pretty much all flashback. We got to deep dive the Will Reeves backstory, and more specifically of, obviously, how he became Hooded Justice. In addition to that, why I like this episode so much is that I think it balanced what I'm kind of looking for overall in a show. So it had the action sequences, right? But it balanced that against some really important character drama as well. So I think it had a very strong role for both of those elements to come together and tell a really interesting and compelling backstory for Will Reeves and Hooded Justice. I really liked it. I thought it was good.
Okay. Well, I mean, as far as doing a synopsis, which we try to do every week, there's really not a ton of synopsis to do, right? The story is going to start with Will Reeves getting his badge pinned on him at a ceremony for cops, the police force. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I want to go into that specifically here in a little bit.
Sure.
But that leads to some warning about the Cyclops with the white power symbol on the forehead, which I, thought was very interesting. And it kind of follows along that he starts running into some people who are clearly connected to the Cyclops organization or white, turns out to be the Cyclops is the KKK, which is funny because the Cyclops actually appears in the Looking Glass episode. When he walks into the mall, there's a painting of a Cyclops outside of the wooden church on the door.
Yeah,
so
you're right.
You clearly know they're still very active today. They're very much a part of it. The 7th Cavalry is essentially all in purposes is the Cyclops still. And so he has a run-in with some cops. He gets badly beat up after he refuses to go, tries to interject about a guy who was arrested that they let go. He's trying to complain about it. They invite him to a drink. He says no, very similar to how Night Owl used to always turn down drinks as well. And he ends up getting badly beaten up and hanged. And, hanged on the same tree. I mean, maybe the same tree that Judd Crawford's going to be hanged from. That's how I read it.
Oh, is that how you read it? Okay, yeah.
I mean, maybe I'm wrong.
I could quite possibly. Yes,
I thought it was the same tree.
Yeah.
And after the confirmation of putting the hood on him, putting the noose on him, that's more in the argument of why I always thought that he would be symbolic for Hooded Justice. As he comes down, he ends up saving a couple getting robbed, and he basically kind of transforms then officially into that persona of vigilante Hooded Justice. Mm-hmm. And basically the rest of the episode is him dealing with the identity of him being Will Reeves and then his identity of him being Hooded Justice and which character is he really and the troubles he gets into with his wife and his son and that he continues to get in with the 7th Cavalry or the Cyclops all the way up to where, basically Angela during this whole time, Angela is, interfacing as him.
Correct.
Versus,
yes.
So she's living the memories. When she basically wakes up and she's sitting with Lady True and they realize that, Lady True's medically bringing her back. And I think that's going to be really interesting for the next episode. Mm-hmm. So let's deep dive a few things here. So opening scene, you probably did you know what you were watching when the opening scene took place? The American Hero story? When Hooded Justice is in the interrogation room?
Oh, and did I think it was American Hero Story instead of that? Yes, I did.
Okay.
I assumed it was the American Hero Story at that point.
And I agreed. And I mean, just because I always thought Hooded Justice was Will Reeves, I knew that this wasn't Hooded Justice, or at least I was assuming this wasn't Hooded Justice.
Right.
Where I knew it wasn't, and it was the American Hero Story, was the violence and how it's way more comic bookish. And so that immediately I said, well, that's not obviously real. So, we know from there, Angela, we get some information. So it's kind of interesting. So nostalgia is illegal. A lot of people were ODing on it.
That's right.
What do you think about this? So nostalgia essentially is memories.
Yeah.
Right? We made the comparison that kind of reminded me of Dumbledore pulling memories out of his wand, from his temple out of his wand to the pensive in the Harry Potter series.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Would you be interested in having nostalgia pills?
I would not.
No.
No.
Would you be interested in having the ability to take somebody else's nostalgia pills?
That is such a slippery slope. I would say no again to that.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I gotta say that I would definitely be down for some memory lane. Not mine necessarily. I don't have anything too exciting, but I would be super excited to be able to get a hold of nostalgia pills of other people. I feel like that would be such a fascinating trip for people. Educationally, it would be fascinating. What if you could take a kid, like a classroom of students, clearly in a safe environment, hopefully, right? Not ODing, but give them a nostalgia pill to show them the civil rights movement, to show them D-Day. Maybe not children in middle school, maybe high school students or college students. You show them actual events that people went through would really, I think, fundamentally transform the population. I mean, if you could really be truly empathetic.
Yeah, and I think I totally get where you're coming from with that, and I think it could certainly be useful as an instruction tool, like a way to teach people, but at the same time, you are reliving firsthand that trauma, and while obviously that would help you better understand the horror and terror that certain people have gone through, be it civil rights movement, you mentioned D-Day as well, of course, like all these different experiences, but that would then prove to be, I would think, equally traumatic for the people probably reliving or experiencing those events as well.
Right.
So while, yes, obviously, would they gain a better understanding of how terrible those situations were? Yeah, absolutely. But then I think they, in turn, would be horribly affected by that for having to also witness that firsthand. Now, we don't get, does she experience the same pain, do we think? Or is it strictly just observing kind of through his eyes what happens? They don't really let us know that,
I would have to say that it's not observing the pain, although she was by this time in a catatonic state, so maybe because she took so many,
right,
that maybe if she would feel it. But I would think it has to specifically be you're just observing what's going on. It would be my thought.
Sure. And I really like the fact that they actually build into the story here that it was originally designed for people with dementia, and that this was a way so that they could remember, obviously, anything that they needed to remember, any happy memories that they wanted to remember, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
And you can see where that's actually a very logical step for people to take. Like, how can we help cure dementia? How can we help people with dementia? Oh, obviously, things pertaining to their memory would be very important. So you can see how it goes from that, but then people beginning to abuse it, and why it would eventually lead to it becoming illegal, because that would certainly be something people will probably lose themselves in when they're using it illegally.
Yes. Let me ask you this. It's outlawed by Redford. And I will tell you this. So we're, 3 episodes left, and we haven't even seen Robert Redford yet?
Yeah, that's right. I thought we'd be seeing him quite often, honestly.
Yeah.
I thought they'd be interjecting or intercutting scenes with him.
Yeah.
In it. Yeah.
Also interesting that it's owned by Lady True.
Yes.
So obviously we know that from the previous episode, Will Reeves was in her facility, and they were both talking, at least Lady True was talking to Angela when she was there with Laurie Blake about the pills, asking if she had her grandfather's pills. Do we believe that he purposely left them there so that she would take them?
I'm on the fence about it. Part of me still wants to say yes, though. I'm really leaning toward yes.
I think so too.
Because it just, the way everything else lines up after that, there's no reason, like in that scene, as I remember it, where she takes him in his wheelchair back to her bakery, I don't see how he's very intelligent. I don't see how he would have left those there by accident. Now, the one thing working against that is he does ask for them, I believe. Like, he wants to take them at one point, I think, in that scene also. And he says it helps me get my memory. So, I don't know. It just, I think there's no, I don't think it could have been an accident that a man as smart as Will Reeves, I still think is. I don't think he's necessarily suffering from dementia to a degree that he needs them to actually remember those events. So that's why I think that he would leave them for a way for Angela to end up potentially taking them.
But the interesting thing is she's unaware of what they are at first.
Correct.
So the question is, as a police officer that doesn't know what nostalgia is, how long have they been outlawed? Okay, and I think I don't know if that's just a continuity error that she wouldn't know what they are, considering it is a controlled, seems like it's a controlled banned substance, right? By this point.
Yeah.
How would you? Do you think that you could make your own nostalgia? Like, what if, like, I was curious is, like, how would you make, like, a Bad Batch? Like, does this have to be chemically made by a company, like like a Purdue pharmaceutical company, or is this something like you can have, like, I don't know, some meth lab create, in a hick town, and they're making really bad batches of really messed up nostalgia for you to take. It's just kind of fascinating that we're dealing with a drug here that is outlawed, but it's, so powerful in a sense.
Right.
So she's taking all this nostalgia, and we start with Will Reeves' ceremony where he is being a cop. He's graduating, and as you notice, the white police chief is passing him, but pinning the badge on all the white officers, and then the one trailing black officer pins the badge on him, tells him, please be aware of the Cyclops, or be aware of the Cyclops, and from there we kind of fast forward a little bit. Will Reeves is having dinner with his soon-to-be wife, who's a reporter. And that's the reporter we find out is the woman, the little baby from the wreckage, correct?
Correct. Okay. Yes, they do confirm that. There's a scene where what's really cool about the nostalgia sequences is how they overlay different moments in time. So you have that moment where it kind of overlays through the back. It's a window or a door, where it's him as a child holding the baby, but then they're lying in bed while they're talking about that moment. So that's playing kind of in the background while they're having a different conversation as adults. So I really liked how they start to kind of overlay these different scenes throughout this entire sequence.
What do you think about the dinner? Do you remember the conversation at all?
Remind me. Refresh my memory.
She's talking to him about him being a cop, and she is specifically saying he is a racial quota, and that he's angry Will Reeves, and that he's such an angry man. Did you have any recollection, like any opinion on that conversation that they were having? I don't think they're married at this time. Is that correct? I don't think so.
I don't necessarily think they are.
I don't think we see a ceremony, so we can't really pinpoint that.
But that, obviously, for the purpose of this episode, I think it's very much foreshadowing, because he's not Hooded Justice, I don't believe, at that point in time yet.
Nope.
So I think it's definitely foreshadowing what will follow from there. And then what we even know about the, Will Reeves from the present day, I think that kind of tracks, because it's very clear. We don't see him necessarily have any violent outbursts firsthand as an older gentleman, but he's claiming to Angela repeatedly that he's the one who strung up their chief of police. So the fact that as a young man he has this kind of streak of anger, that makes total sense for what little we probably know about him at this time. Obviously, fast forwarding a bit to when he does become Hooded Justice, that's very clearly an outlet for him to be able to vent a lot of that.
So let's talk about how he kind of makes his way towards being Hooded Justice. He is walking along his beat, and he sees a man lighting a Molotov cocktail and throwing it through a Jewish delicatessen.
Correct.
That actor is Glenn Flesher, who is phenomenal. He's in the show Billions. He was in True Detective. He's in the Joker movie. He's in Suburbicon. He's in a lot of things where he is a bad guy because he just kind of has this really creepy vibe to him. No more so than in True Detective Season 1. So he is ultimately just disgusting in that. And good actor. Really love him. Great in Billions, like I said. But he is great in this episode, too. And he throws a Molotov cocktail right through the front window and just walks away as if nothing happened. Will Reeves is trying to track him down, and this guy is clearly not scared of a black police officer. We can probably surmise that there are clearly different rules in place for black officers even dealing with white criminals, white people, and he arrests him, and he takes him back to the police station, where he gets his first inclination to what the Cyclops is.
Yeah, that's correct.
And it's not the booking officer, but another fellow police officer comes by, flashes the sign, the white power sign on top of his head, and then takes him away and says, "We'll take care of this." It does kind of seem like he's standing up for Will Reeves at first.
Yeah, at first it comes across that way, but you get the whole vibe from that. And then when he flashes the sign, you're like, "Oh, okay."
Right.
But even prior to that, you're like, why is this guy doing this?
Right.
Because also worth noting, which is the most obvious thing about this episode too, but we'd commented the past couple episodes that while the series started very focused on race, it kind of gotten away from that. So obviously this episode addresses it throughout the entirety of the episode.
It is the episode.
It is the episode. It's the whole purpose of it. So yeah, I think it's interesting that they obviously incorporate that again as a very important part of the tone of this series as well.
So as he's walking, after he realizes that guy gets away, the white, I think, is it he doesn't realize he gets a. No, he does realize the white man gets away.
Well, he runs into him again later.
Correct.
On the street. Well, actually, I think his name's Fred, I want to say. So, Fred. Oh, great shout out to Action Comics. It's Superman.
Yes.
So he's on the street, and he kind of walks up to a vendor, and they're just looking through the Superman comic, which would have been, I believe, the first Superman comic released. Yes. If memory serves me correctly. And then Fred, the guy who he had arrested, intentionally knocks shoulders with him. So, he knows that he was let go.
And he goes in and complains to the booking officer.
Yeah.
The booking officer says, let it go. Later that night, while he's walking home, he is being kind of trailed by a police car. Two guys, and they invite him out to get a drink. He turns them down politely a couple times. Mm-hmm. As they drive off, you see a flash of them carrying basically dragging two people,
right?
Two black people. Not real. He was seeing that.
Correct. Well, that's from the scene in Tulsa.
Yeah. First episode. Good.
Yep. So that's one of those overlaying sequences. Yep. That it was very jarring. It caught me off guard when it.
But the red blood from the right body being dragged, you could tell that it was part of that same viewpoint. That when it goes color, it's not, not in the current timeline, or not. We're not in real time.
Exactly. Yeah.
And he goes in an alley. They come out. They basically kick the crap out of him. They take him to the tree. They put the hood over him. They hang him. They let him out. They let him down. They say, if you don't drop this, if you don't stick to yourself, if you don't stay out of, I think he says, quote unquote, white man's business, we'll leave you up there. And they drive away.
Yeah. I think, if I may interject briefly here, the reason why I was hesitant about the tree is just because I thought later in the episode when his wife mentions that they're moving back to Tulsa. So that's why I thought that was maybe a different location.
Oh, maybe,
so what? I need to rewatch that though.
Maybe it is.
Yeah.
Maybe you're right. I guess I didn't. I saw a big oak tree.
It almost frames it kind of the same way too. It's because it's a lone tree that's staying there. Yeah. So anyway, but that's why I was hesitant on that. I'm like, I thought they weren't in Tulsa at the time, but
if you're listening to this and you think it's the same tree, or if it's a different tree, whoever's right, you give us a shout out.
For sure.
We're at aliensandcowboys@gmail.com. Let us know what you guys think. But as he's walking home, he comes across, obviously still has the noose, still has the rope, still has the hood, comes across a couple being robbed. And he rips eye holes out of the mask, he puts it on, and he charges in and beats the ever-living crap out of the three thugs, saves the life of the couple, or at least their possessions. What'd you think of that?
Yeah, I thought it was a really compelling scene. I think that this is a moment where very clearly that's I don't know what you want to call it, the light switch moment where he truly becomes kind of hooded justice for the first time and decides to take the law into his own hands, which of course is something I think he probably wrestles with because he does look up to Bass Reeves and he has this mentality of, there'll be no more mob justice, I think is what Bass Reeves says in that scene from the movie that he used to watch as a kid. So it's obviously him kind of taking it upon himself to stand up against these people committing this crime, not as a police officer, but as a vigilante instead.
Right.
And I think it's because he obviously has had what power and authority he thought he would have had as an officer has already been greatly diminished at this point because of how he's been treated and because of how racist everything was at the time. So now, by donning the hood, he's able to actually make this impact. And it's sad that he has to don this hood in order to do that, but it's a very character-defining moment for him at that point.
Well, and not just don the hood, because the next step he takes is he has to actually put on white makeup.
Correct.
And he puts white makeup around his eyes so that he looks essentially like a white person is hooded justice.
Right.
Let's talk about that, because I want to talk about the white makeup, and then I want to talk about how he uses this time period to start trailing Cyclops members, this organization, specifically back to Fred's supermarket.
Correct. Yes.
And I want to talk about that supermarket scene, and I want to talk about this white makeup, and then I want to talk about Captain Metropolis. All three of these things, because to me, all three of these things will go into my argument of why the American Hero story on TV is actually accurate, and that Petey is the one that's actually full of crap. So, and I know that you're the opposite. You think that Petey is correct and the American Hero story is wrong. Okay. So let's just talk about this real quick. He tracks Fred to Fred's supermarket because he realizes there are people in the back that are KKK members or Cyclops members, and he beats the ever-living crap out of them. He takes a guy out front. He's fighting with him. He stands up. Fred, behind the counter, has a sawed-off shotgun, tries to shoot him, forcing Hooded Justice to dive out the window. Okay. Pin that. Because to me, that's very symbolic of the very first time we see Hooded Justice in the show jumping through the supermarket window on the other side, coming into the supermarket.
Into the supermarket, yeah.
Okay. And then I want to talk about, just briefly, and we can talk about him more in detail if you want. He ends up meeting Captain Metropolis, who recruits Hooded Justice. They come together to form their first group. What's their militia called?
Minutemen.
That's right,
Yep.
Minutemen. And they end up having a homosexual relationship. Okay, so those three things: the white makeup, the supermarket, and the relationship with Captain Metropolis. To be fair, to make my defense on why the American Hero story, which is the meta TV show about Hooded Justice within the show, is accurate. And we only have this conversation because Petey, in a previous episode, when Lori and Sister Knight, Angela, are talking about it on their way to see Lady True, Petey gets offended and says this entire show is full of crap. He calls it bullshit. I actually think that I'm going to make the argument on why it's actually accurate, or pretty accurate. So, the white makeup. So, Hooded Justice up to this point has always been based on a white guy, right? And that makes sense because that's what everybody's seeing is a white person. They're not. He's got gloves on. They can't see that he's a black guy. Okay. So to me, his representation of a white guy is technically accurate to what they do know. So that's not them exaggerating that it's not like they're taking a black guy and changing his appearance. This is the appearance that they're aware of that's passing down generation to generation. Do you agree with that?
My whole argument's predicated on the fact that they are sensationalizing everything.
Okay.
So do you want to make your argument in your entirety, and then I'll circle back?
Okay,
cool.
Okay. So that's my first one, is that they are making the argument that he is white to them because that's how he is represented by the makeup he is putting on. The supermarket one is the most fascinating to me because the supermarket one, when we first see him, to me, that's how things do get exaggerated. And it turns out, instead of a story of him coming from the back of the building, having a fight, stopping a robbery, and then jumping, then he's jumping through the front of it versus he's coming in through the front of the window, stopping a robbery and smashing everybody up. I think that's how this gets exaggerated. I think it's the same story. I think that the story where he's getting shot at by Fred is the same story that gets exaggerated to how he's coming through the window in the beginning of the show. You agree with that?
Once again, I disagree here.
No, that's perfect. That's great.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Captain Metropolis, the idea, and I do take issue, I don't take issue with his homosexuality. I take issue with that it's a light switch flipped on, that all of a sudden he's in a homosexual relationship with Captain Metropolis with no predication of him being a homosexual in the movie. Now, that can entirely be based on the masks, the alter egos of wearing these identities, and who's the true person here, this entire meta that this show talks about. But the idea that he seems to be, up to really the back half of the show, happily married up until that point. It just seems odd that this guy comes to his house, recruits him to fight crime with him, and next thing we know, they're having sex. Maybe everybody else thinks that's fine. And that is fine. Again, I'm not saying that the act is bad. I'm saying that the story doesn't give me any notion to think that he would all of a sudden just jump right into bed with Captain Metropolis. So, break down my story where I think that Hero, just to kind of summarize here, the American Hero story has illustrated that Hooded Justice was a white man because that's how William Reeves was portrayed, that the exaggeration of the supermarket robbery was in fact a not technically accurate robbery stoppage, but it was something that they maybe thought he was robbing him, and it ended up being that he was beating people up that were Klan members, so they were considered the villains of that time, and he ends up jumping through the window, vice versa, versus him coming through the window. So I think that's a telephone game passing that story down generationally, but they do get the homosexual relationship correct between him and Captain Metropolis, which I find very odd. So again, I think they're batting really 2.5 out of 3. So I'll do the supermarket story is about a 0.5 point.
I got you.
Okay, and you disagree with me.
I do.
So make your argument.
I think in the broadest let me preface everything. In the broadest possible strokes in terms of the events that took place, okay, they maybe kind of get the general gist, but it breaks down pretty quickly from there. So I think the big problem with American Hero Story is that they're both sensationalizing and sanitizing what happened in actuality. So the biggest offender of this is the two scenes in that grocery store where the villains in American Hero Story are made out to be people robbing it, and he breaks in, well, swoops in, let's say, to kind of save the day, brutally so, when in actuality it's KKK members that he is stopping, which in terms of people interpreting the real events into a TV show, that's something that's a huge oversight, and that's something where it would have been hugely important to convey the fact that the actual enemy, who he was actually fighting, the entire reason for him being there was actually the KKK. So that seems to me, or the Cyclops organization. So
sure.
That seems to me very deliberate for the creators of American Hero Story to probably have known the real events, but choose not to include it. And this is all from the vast and insidious conspiracy that's alluded to throughout the entirety of the show thus far. So they're what I think is deliberately the showrunners within Watchmen of American Hero Story choosing to not include that detail when I think they probably would have known that. That's a horrendous oversight. So the inaccuracies there, I don't think can be tolerated in terms of how they're choosing to interpret this. The makeup as well. Just literally, I know this is very on-the-nose description of it, but it's just blatantly incorrect because Will Reeves is not a white man. And the fact that you get to see at the very beginning of this episode, American Hero Story, he removes his hood, and it's a white guy, and it's not, in fact, a black man like Will Reeves. Sure. So that's something that I think is, once again, just completely incorrect there. I get the perspective that you're talking about, where because he uses the makeup to make it look like even under the hood, but still it's incorrect.
I don't think that they would probably know his real identity anyways, though.
Correct. I think at that point, both from comics and without us having this nostalgia sequence, the whole identity of him, yes, has been a very big mystery.
Right.
But I'm just saying, I get it. I get where you're coming from, but just literally as blatantly and obviously as possible, that's just wrong. It's another part that they get incorrect.
Of course. I get that they're not. I mean, we know who the real Hood of Justice is. Right. I'm just simply arguing them building this story based on an identity of a person that they, even to this day, probably couldn't name. So to them, maybe they really believe he is a white guy.
Right. I don't necessarily doubt that part of it.
Okay.
Right. No. So I guess I concede that part. Okay. But once again, the show itself is wrong.
Right.
Is my point I'm trying to make there. And then lastly, yes, in terms of his relationship with Captain Metropolis, I also felt like in this flashback sequence, it does seem very sudden because we understand that he's already in a relationship outside of that. But that being said, I think that this is where I think the comics kind of help tie in to fill in the blanks because that was something that was rumored about him. And they had to, once the Minutemen were formed, I don't know what you want to call it, PR people for Minutemen, essentially, they tried to keep that part under wraps so that people didn't know that. They tried to encourage him to have a relationship with, Sally. With Sally Jupiter at that point as well, so that it didn't look like he had a relationship with Captain Metropolis. So while the sequence here, I think it does seem very sudden, there's a lot of predication for this kind of outside of that in terms of what the rumors were of the time. So
I think majority of people watching the show probably did not read the comic book. So I would say if they hint the comic book is where this relationship starts, that's fine. I didn't read the comic book. I know you did a long time ago.
Yeah, it's been a while since.
But I would think for this movie, unless I blinked and missed it, this really does come out of nowhere as far as the episode is concerned, as well as the majority of the population would go. Mm-hmm. So I guess it's fine. I mean, again, it's okay. It's a combination. It's really interesting because I think you brought this up earlier, maybe off mic. It's really interesting because they are having a interracial sexual relationship.
Yeah.
So not only are they having a homosexual relationship back in the day, they're having an interracial homosexual relationship, which would be double taboo.
Yeah. Exactly.
And that's why they also, I thought, make the funny quip about, well, how about you wear your outfit, I'll wear my outfit, as like masking who they are. So again, this entire show is based on identity. Are you really the person who you are with the mask on? Or are you really the person you are with the mask off? And even Hood of Justice not only has to hide who his real identity is, he has to hide who his identity is from his wife. He's hiding things from everybody, basically.
Right. And I get that. And that is, thank you for bringing that up again, because, we did talk about that off mic, but I think that might have been a storytelling choice also at that point, when how they chose to confirm his relationship with Captain Metropolis is oddly enough not necessarily from his own viewpoint, but from everyone else's, if that makes sense. Like, I get that Angela's experiencing this kind of through the eyes of Will Reeves.
Sure.
But at the same time, just like you said, it would have been double taboo. Those were two groups of people that were severely persecuted at the time.
Right.
So to have both of those things pertain to Will Reeves and him trying to keep that under wraps, I'm sure it kind of is supposed to be jolting at that point when they confirm that in fact was the case. So, again, yes, it is very sudden. Once again, I understand. It's very sudden when it comes up in the episode, but I think they did that very deliberately. So.
Okay. Let's talk about Captain Metropolis. Captain Metropolis is recruitment of Hooded Justice, and they're kind of in this relationship, whether it's personal or not. It seems to be sexual, not really necessarily personal. They have this issue where Hooded Justice, he came on to this agreement that as long as they would help him track down this Cyclops. And so as they're doing this press conference, and Hooded Justice is getting ready to talk about the Cyclops organization, he gets stopped by Captain Metropolis. And Captain Metropolis says, no, that's not important. We're going to worry about, Moloch, right? The guy from the comic book and the movie. I believe he's from the movie, correct? Isn't it played the old man that's dying of cancer in the movie?
Yeah,
it's Moloch.
I think so.
It's Rorschach's enemy.
Yeah.
That he goes and visits. But they have this flashback to that poster. It's the bank. I think it's the bank poster where it's Captain Metropolis dragging a black man away, which was hanging up in the trailer in the very first episode.
You're correct.
And
yes.
I want to talk about this. The idea that is Captain Metropolis part of the White Cyclops? Or let me ask you this. Let me rephrase this.
Sure.
So maybe he's not an actual Cyclops member, and maybe this goes to Judd Crawford, which we can talk about in a little bit. The overarching conspiracy of the show is not really an overarching conspiracy. What it is systematic racism. It's simply patriarchal racism. White patriarchal racism is what it is. And that's showing you how it is prevailing at every aspect of this show. Whether it's Judd Crawford, who, although he might be thinking he's doing the right thing, is in fact a white patriarchal racist in his own right. Same thing with Looking Glass. Same thing with Captain Metropolis. And that it's not really this big overarching vast conspiracy against people. It's just simply this is the system that was set up by people a long time ago, and it's perpetuating certain groups of people over certain groups of people. And unfortunately, the black people in the story aren't ever going to be able to defeat this overarching conspiracy because everybody, whether they know it or not, is actually a part of it, and they are benefiting from it. And I think that that's probably, obviously, what clearly the conspiracy is.
Sure. Yeah, and I read that. The thing I thought of, especially because is it Captain Metropolis on the phone before he goes to shoot up the... Okay.
Yeah.
Because his Captain Metropolis's mentality at that point reminded me of that line that Looking Glass says to Angela when Angela asks if Judd was a racist. And he says, well, he's a white man in Oklahoma. So, just to your point, that's how I kind of interpreted Captain Metropolis. I don't think he's a member of the KKK or of the Cyclops organization or anything like that.
It's just his white privilege.
Yeah,
that he doesn't deal with it, right?
Exactly.
He doesn't have to see it.
He literally even says that, I think, at that point, that like his problems, Hooded Justice's problems, are not his problems. Or actually, more to the point, Will Reeves' problems are not his problems.
Well, he even makes the comment after the movie theater where Will Reeves goes into the movie theater after all these people as the cop. He's not even Hooded Justice.
Correct, yeah.
Were basically, hoodwinked or telepathically hypnotized to start beating each other up.
Right.
And, Captain Metropolis says, no, that black people will riot all the time. This isn't, you don't need anything for them, these people to hurt each other, as he says.
Yeah.
So obviously you can tell that Hooded Justice or Captain Metropolis can't really hide his racism himself, that he is arguably, he's part of the racism. He's part of this vast conspiracy.
Oh, absolutely. I think that he is. I don't think he's necessarily a member of these organizations, but I think it's very clear that he's still racist. Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
So after he hangs up the phone, he pulls out his gun. He shoots Fred. He shoots at... Do you think Fred doesn't know who he is?
I do think that. That's what prompts him.
Yeah, no,
to
agreed.
Shoot Fred is that Fred.
But do you think
makes
Fred's
a very
messing with him, or
disparaging
do you think Fred just doesn't know who he is?
I think Fred doesn't know who he is.
Yeah,
I would say,
I would think that that's the point, that somebody of Fred's stature would pay no attention to anybody in the black community,
right?
Or care, or as he would say, they look alike. I think is even what he says.
Yes, I believe that is what he says.
So he moves forward, and he breaks in and starts shooting down all these Cyclops members, and they seem to be working with, as he tracks them through movie projectors, right, through the movie lens, and he realizes they are telepathically or kinetically using this.
Yeah, it's like mind control.
Mind control.
Yeah.
The guy that's actually filming the audio, I thought that was going to be Captain Metropolis.
Oh, that would have been an interesting twist.
Granted,
yeah.
I know it's not.
But I thought the cop, I think.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
But I thought it was going to be him when he was like, don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. Come on over, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, he's actually recording this, to perpetuate. So I thought that would have been really interesting. It kind of reminded me of like, it would have been like the boys from Amazon. Like if it was Captain Metropolis, it's like he's setting these people up so that they can fight. So basically it gives them somebody to fight back. It gives them a villain.
Oh,
like
sure.
He's basically masterminding his own villain so that he can continue to be popular and make money and sell merchandise or whatever it is. That's what it kind of reminded me of. But let's talk about this though, because he takes this after he kills everybody and burns the place down. He steals one of these projectors.
Yes.
And we realize what he does is he actually takes this projector and he transforms it into a strobe light flashing flashlight. And we see him utilize this on Judd Crawford.
Right.
And he convinces Judd Crawford to push him along to the tree. He convinces Judd Crawford to hang himself. They have a small conversation, which we can talk about in a second. What did you think about this scene? Am I missing anything else up to this point that you can think of?
Man, there's the part where I think it's worth calling out where he catches his, well, not really catches his son. His son didn't think he was doing anything wrong, but his son dressing up as Hooded Justice, and he obviously is not okay with that, which I think is...
Go into that.
Yeah, well, I just thought it was an interesting scene. It's a commentary, I think, about how that's not something that he wants to see his son become necessarily, but also the fact that the son's putting on the white makeup, I think, is the more important part of that.
I agree with you.
So, yeah, I just wanted to call that scene out really quickly as well. It's also in that scene that his wife mentions that we're moving back to Tulsa or something along those lines, which is why I thought the tree might have been different from earlier in the episode. But anyway, there's that scene. We're probably missing something else, but that's the...
But I think that those are the main parts.
Those are the main parts, yeah.
So let's talk about Judd Crawford speaking with Will Reeves. And Judd Crawford finally, for some reason, he lets him out of the trance. And Judd Crawford's talking. I like how when he's pushing him, by the way, he just keeps his flashlight trained back on him like, whatever.
This scene was not... Everything about this episode was so strong. And then they got to this flashlight strobe mind control device, and I kind of lost me there.
The cynic in me was screaming like, "That's what this is a strobe light flashlight."
Right? I was not a fan of that part. I really wish they would have gotten to the conclusion in a different way without this mind control thing. But anyway, I digress.
So Will Reeves accuses him of being basically a part of the problem, part of the Cyclops. And Judd Crawford says he doesn't know what he's talking about. He's done everything he can to protect him and his people, and that robe is actually not his. It's his grandfather's. He loves his grandfather just like anybody would love their grandfather. It's really great that he says he loves his grandfather because we know that Angela doesn't really love her grandfather.
Yeah, that's
as
true.
we know about it. So it's kind of fascinating that we're talking grandfathers to grandchildren here with Will talking to Judd because essentially they're the grandfather-grandson of their conversation, right? And confirms that Judd Crawford said that's not my robe. That's my grandfather's, and doesn't come out and say I'm not a part of this vast conspiracy. Doesn't deny that he's doesn't really confirm though either that he's working with Joe Keane. Doesn't deny he's working with Joe Keane.
Right? Yeah.
All we have is Joe Keane to go off of, and we don't know if Joe Keane's trustworthy narrator. We don't really know who's a trustworthy narrator. We don't know if Will Reeves is a trustworthy narrator because this guy can walk, right? This guy's perfectly fine, it seems like. And Judd Crawford just says, you have no idea what you're talking about. Will Reeves doesn't want to hear it, says you are part of the problem. You've always been part of the problem. Everybody's part of the problem. And flashes him again with the flashlight, has him hang himself. Do you have any comments on this particular scene?
Yeah, I just want to call out their little conversation about legacy as well.
Go ahead.
Because Judd, correct me if I'm wrong, is essentially making the argument that while he is not directly a part of this necessarily, and I know, just as you mentioned, he doesn't come right out and say, I'm not a 7th Cavalry member, I'm not in the KKK or anything like that. He doesn't straight up say that. But he's essentially trying to defend himself in his actions, but then at the same time talks about how important the legacy of his grandfather and about how the people who came before him are. But that legacy is horrible. So, I don't know, it's kind of, those are warring opinions with one another. And then Will kind of compliments, or not compliments, he comments on that concept of legacy as well, and kind of calls him out on that, is how I interpreted that scene, or those particular moments of that scene. So, once again, why I find that so important, not only do we kind of get an insight probably into Judd's character and his mentality, but the concept of legacy is huge throughout this whole series so far as well. That was the whole point with Lady True argument, or in the episode with all the egg imagery,
right?
You know, so it's constantly something that's coming back up. So.
Okay, let me ask you about Will Reeves here. So he obviously is wanting his nostalgia pills back. Why do you think he wants his pills back so bad? Do you think he wants to relive memories, or do you think he wants to he needs them so he can remember?
I think so. I mentioned that I don't think dementia is necessarily an issue with him. I just have not gotten that vibe from him that he's losing his memory as a result of something along those lines. Now, if I'm wrong about him deliberately leaving them for Angela, I think why he wants them is so he can double check, essentially. It's hard to remember, what you have for breakfast 2 weeks ago. So much less remembering someone of 105 years old, remembering back to when he was a younger man in his late 20s, early 30s, maybe trying to see who was involved in these different things throughout history. He'd need a refresher on that. He'd need to get his memory, as he said, so he can make sure that he's potentially targeting the right people.
Yeah.
So I think that is why he would want them back, if he truly did want them back. So
let me ask you this. So I don't know if this will be my take on this, whether it's a hot take or not. I think that Will Reeves sees Cyclops members in his sleep. Okay, I'm not saying that white supremacists and racists don't exist everywhere, because they do. I think that this is a guy who's been fighting crime, or fighting specifically this group of people, organizational, decade after decade, as it transforms from the Cyclops to the KKK to the 7th Cavalry, right? Doesn't matter what the name of this organization is. It's the ideology that's pervaded since he was a boy in 1921, okay? He's been fighting this that entire time. I think that I don't want to dare say that Will Reeves is racist, but I'm not going to go so far as to say he's not racist against arguably white people, if that's possible, if you can be racist against white people. Even if Judd Crawford was, in fact, doing things to prevent violence against people of color, I don't think Will Reeves would care. I think that he would think of him as a part of the problem, even if he is in fact trying to prevent violence from taking place, just because he's in a position of power, and that the robe belonged to somebody in his family tree and his legacy far down the road, so we need to cut down this family tree, or essentially hang everybody up in this family tree. And I think that he's hanging Judd Crawford because he, in fact, is seeing 7th Cavalry members, Cyclops members in his sleep. He sees them everywhere, and he has to continue to fight these people because he's deranged, he's obsessed. Going back to the dinner he has with his wife, he's angry Will Reeves.
Right.
And he, I think, I don't know how he wouldn't suffer some form of a PTSD after the first time that they attempted to hang him. Oh, yeah. And I think that he basically snaps himself into the point where he is, he's obsessed, and that's fair. Don't get me wrong. I'm not taking the nostalgia pills to deal with to go with what he's dealing with. I wouldn't want to ever deal with that. But I think it's to the point in 2019, he's still obsessed with it, and he's still tracking down people, and he's still killing them. He can't maybe physically hang Judd Crawford, but he can physically make Judd Crawford hang himself. And I think that that's my viewpoint on it. I would have to say that Will Reeves, just as much as white people probably hate him in the story, he hates white people. Is that harsh? Do you agree with it? What do you think? If you have problems with that take, email me, get at me, let me know.
Let me know.
And I'm not trying to say he's a bad guy. I'm just trying to say it's a very nuanced take to this character that he clearly doesn't like white people, it seems like. I mean, it's weird that he's hanging out with Lady True, but we know there's some form of a larger scheme they got going on here. But he doesn't really seem to be talking to white people that often. And when we see him talking to white people, he essentially is killing them. But again, everybody to him essentially is a member of the Cyclops. So
when I think with Judd, I get where you're coming from with that argument, but Judd was involved with the 7th Cavalry. Once again, was he actively a member? It doesn't seem like he was a member,
They had
but there was an
agreement.
arrangement.
There was an agreement.
So
But two gang Bloods and Crips can have an arrangement, and Bloods aren't Crips and Crips aren't Bloods.
Well, yeah, but okay. From Will Reeves' perspective, though, I can very, very easily see him not at all wanting to make that distinction. And then it begs the question, should he make that? I'm not arguing that he should be going around killing people. He still shouldn't be doing that, obviously. But in terms of him being like, oh, well, Judd is associated with these people, so I'll give him a pass, though, because he's trying to be helpful. Like, someone in Will Reeves' mindset, there's no way that argument would fly. He still sees that as very cut and dry, black and white. You are helping these people. These people are bad. You are bad. You need to be stopped.
It's also very interesting. The episode is black and white,
yes,
because that's exactly what this is. There's no shades of gray here. There is pure evil here. He's calling out what this evil is, and he's killing it. But like I said, whether Judd Crawford, you can prove, either had an agreement with Joe Keane and his people, or he was an active member of the 7th Cavalry, or he's just a guy who, you know what, he loved his grandfather. His grandfather was, you know, whatever. They had a relationship. Is it probably smart to keep a clan robe? Nope. You know, that's probably something he should never have kept. But again, you know, the idea to Will Reeves that Judd Crawford and Joe Keane could strike an agreement to prevent the harm to black people is the antithesis to what Will Reeves would say is the social conspiracy here, right? The idea that my safety is not my safety. My safety is only here because we have two powerful white guys on maybe different corners, or maybe the same corner 2 steps apart, shaking hands for my safety, right? And I think that I agree with you. I'm not saying he's not right, that he's not seen it that way. But I'm saying even if Judd Crawford was coming from this of a benevolent ways to actually keep people from dying and never actually hurt anybody himself, he just had to strike this deal to prevent people from dying. Will Reeves is still thinking that he's part of the Cyclops. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
and again,
I understand.
And to me, that's Will Reeves. I don't know. Call it what it call it. I mean, he's killing people, and here's the thing. Outside of the agreement we know that Joe Keane said he struck, we have no evidence that Judd Crawford has ever done anything bad. We don't. The show's never given us evidence of any wrongdoing except for cocaine.
True.
Okay? Whatever. You know, illegal or not illegal. I guess we don't even know if it's illegal in this. The only outlawed we know is nostalgia.
Nostalgia, yeah, that's true.
It's way wilder ride than cocaine. But we know that they struck the deal again. We don't know that he's done anything illegal or immoral after that. And to be fair, with the Joe Keane character, specifically after we had this last episode with Looking Glass, I don't know how malicious Joe Keane's character really is either. He makes the argument he comes in here to get these yahoos in line to prevent violence. He does threaten violence.
Yeah, exactly.
But we don't know if he's perpetuated the violence.
I guess technically he absolutely does, though.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, he's
right.
sending, for all intents and purposes, we can assume that at the end of that Looking Glass episode, I think it's Keane who says, okay, we got what we wanted out of Looking Glass, go kill him.
No, you're right. I'm wrong. I forgot about that.
No, I get what you're saying, though, too, in the sense that it's someone who's trying to rein in an organization, perhaps, so they don't lash out, but he's still very much a part of that and still allowing those things to happen. So he's horrible.
It's tough, and and again, I don't want to come off as always trying to. It sounds probably horrible that I always feel like I'm trying to defend the 7th Cavalry. I'm not. I love that we're getting more nuance into them. I love that.
Well, and I think what this episode really firmly establishes is nuance kind of across the board.
Yes.
So once again, showrunners Lindelof had mentioned that they don't like to use the term good guys or bad guys,
right?
Because that becomes a little bit too cut and dry for the story they're trying to tell. And I think this episode really enforces that. While you completely can understand where Will Reeves is coming from, I think, and it's horrible to see all these terrible things he's gone through. Now the fact that he is working with Lady True, who certainly seems like a villain, like a mastermind of some kind, right? Kind of following in Veight's footsteps. So you have these characters that are coming together, that are working together, that seem to be for ill ends, essentially. But, it's once again, it's that nuance. You can see where a lot of them are kind of coming from and why they are arriving at where they are now. So one of the things, once again, the show does so well is just it keeps you guessing. It gives you just enough to answer some questions you had, but then it gives you just even more questions moving forward. So from here, where we go next is going to be very interesting.
Well, and generally, like you said, they generally answer the questions the next episode. Although the Looking Glass, whether he's alive or not, was not answered this episode.
not.
From the future forward episode, it doesn't seem like he will be answered either. If they wait 2 episodes, you and I talked about this, and he's alive, right? We both agree that we think he's alive?
If they wait 2 episodes to go back to Looking Glass's story, I would be pissed if he's just dead at the beginning of the episode. Like if it were to pick up after that evening, where the 7th Cavalry goes in to attack him, clearly, if it just then fast forwards and like, oh, yep, he was killed in that sequence, that would make me very mad. I hope they don't do that.
Okay, a couple questions for you. So on the future forward episodes, what we can expect here, we have 3 episodes left after this.
Correct.
Dr. Manhattan, I'm going to go ahead and say we'll be back next episode. Do you think so?
I don't know, actually. I think they might push him off at least 1 more.
Think so? 8?
I really do. Yeah. I really do. I don't think they'll necessarily hold his entrance to the finale, but I can see them pushing it off 1 more.
What if they hold Redford's entrance to the finale?
What's that?
Robert Redford.
Oh, Robert Redford? Well, it's at this point looking like they probably will.
It'd be funny if he's just not in the film. The show, we just talk about him. Like he's just president.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm interested because the most thing I'm interested in for this next episode is going to be the trial of Adrian Veidt. This trial looks like it's going to be phenomenal. I hope it's more than a 5-minute clip. I'm expecting them to be in this like multiple times. I want people to come in and make arguments of defense, and I want half this episode to be this trial. And I'm really interested in that. I do think that we're going to see Dr. Manhattan because if we've been following the years, it's 7 years to declare somebody legally dead, which is what Veidt was declared in the first episode.
Okay, yeah.
So 7 years would be 7 candles, although we didn't see a candle this episode. But
that's true. We didn't see Veidt at all this episode. Which is the first. I think it's the first episode we don't see him. I believe so. Yeah.
I'd be shocked if I think he'll be in here this episode.
Okay,
Maybe I'm wrong. I'm going to go on a limb here.
I hope you're right. I've said from the outset of our podcast coverage of this that I wanted to see Dr. Manhattan. So,
do you get the feeling this is going longer than 1 season?
I don't as of yet.
I think
that they will. While we won't get much, I don't think, from Pirate Jenny or Red Scare or Panda or any of these guys, which is kind of unfortunate. I was hoping that we'd get more from their characters, which we still could, I guess, in the next few episodes. But I see them bringing this to a conclusion here pretty succinctly.
No, I think the Lady True storyline, which is the overarching villain or the overarching story that needs to be stopped, will definitely be taken care of. Mm-hmm. The problem is, if this is a 1-season show, what baffles me is the Adrian Veidt story then. Because if he's not going to ever come back, even if he does come back and he shows up in, say, episode 8 or 9 back in the real time, what's it matter then? And why is he in this show? Like, why is he not his own show is what I'm asking.
Yeah,
and he's
Adrian
basically
Veidt
his own show. Right.
Yeah.
But it doesn't seem to make any deal or impact on the original story.
Yeah. What I could see them doing with this series, if they do continue beyond season 1, is to make this an anthology. Okay. As opposed to a direct sequel, like season 2 being a direct sequel to season 1. I could very easily see them tying this story up with a bow at the end of season 1. Then, depending on what happens with Dr. Manhattan or Veidt, the great part about those particular characters anyway is that they're not even on Earth at this point. So if you want to still incorporate a broader, overarching plot line that still kind of wraps in Lori, she's an FBI agent, that could take her anywhere, really. Dr. Manhattan, Veidt, you could still keep all those characters alive and then have different groups of vigilantes in different cities that the anthology kind of picks up with and then intersperses some of these other characters. It just seems like this one's, I think, heading to a very conclusive ending. So would you want to see, we've talked about this a bit before, do you want to see a season 2 with the continuation of all of these character storylines? Well,
I feel like we have Joe Keane, like as far as like good guys finishing villain storylines, we have arguably 3 storylines, right? I'm going to argue 3. Okay. We have the Joe Keane, the Lady True, that we're assuming is a villain, and Adrian Veidt can't be a good guy, because he's never really a good guy. So I think that we have these 3 storylines, and it seems like a lot to deal with in 3 episodes, And it's kind of like we were talking about The Mandalorian, how we've been 3 episodes in. We'll have a 4th episode of 8. So we're halfway through the show, and we still have probably the 2 secondary most important characters of the show to introduce already. And we're not even halfway through we're about halfway through the show.
Right.
So I find it fascinating. We don't know we haven't seen Robert Redford. We haven't seen Dr. Manhattan. We haven't seen Adrian Veidt interact with anybody outside of Adrian Veidt and Crookshanks and Phillips, who, are his clones. And, we haven't even really seen Angela interact with Will Reeves.
I know. I want to see.
And is Dan going to get out of jail? Because the Night Owl's in jail, and we don't know anything about Lube Man yet.
Right.
I mean, there's just a lot of things to wrap up in 3 episodes.
Yeah, and here's the thing. I can see a couple of those being explained away very easily. First of all, with Night Owl, as interesting as I think it would be for him to make an appearance, the story, even with the alluding to his character they've done, it doesn't need it.
Correct.
We understand what he meant to Laurie in the past, where he's at currently, and he has no bearing from there on this current storyline. So I can see them kind of putting the axe in that type of storyline and just not pursuing it. We know what we know, move past it. In terms of Petey, potentially if he's Lube Man, there is a very easy way for them to probably explain that away as a very humorous part of the show. Just very quick in a single scene, somehow they catch Petey trying to get his costume on before he goes out to investigate something. Oh, that was you idiot. And then, I don't know, they could very easily make that a comedic moment that leads to, once again, nothing further after that.
Sure.
So, I don't know, some of those lingering plot threads, while they could deep dive it if they want, they could just as easily tie it off. So,
you're not wrong. I can't imagine we're going to do this entire series, essentially if it's one season, this entire series with Cal being just stay-at-home dad.
Okay. You've been big on that too.
I'm big on who the actor is in the story.
No, and I know the actor and what he has done in the past in terms of his roles and more of an action-oriented, actor. It seems like, but I could also then just once again for the purposes of this show, he's there as Angela's support.
But I'm trying to think of any other actor, let's say any other character that's not a masked character that doesn't have a bigger role. Every other person that's not wearing a mask has a significant role to play in this film or in the show. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't seem like he does. He's just there. And for whatever reason, there's more to him than meets the eyes. It's not that I don't trust him. I don't trust that he doesn't mean anything.
Sure. Well, we've said the same about Topher, too. We've got nothing character development-wise from Topher over the past couple episodes either. It would, and I would think that Lindelof, I know that people really enjoyed The Leftovers. I know that people are very controversial about Lost. I'm a big Lost fan, so they messed some stuff up, I would say, made things difficult, but really an enjoyable show. I would think, though, that he doesn't want to go out on type of a Lost ending, though, where there's a lot of things where you're like, what the hell happened here? And we have more questions than we have answers. So although they've done a really good job of asking questions and then answering them in the next episode, it seems like they have to get to answering some more questions, asking some more questions probably, and moving a little quicker. Sure.
And then because I'm hoping that the next episode, half of it's the Veidt trial, maybe we'll get a lot of exposition dump in that trial that will tell us a lot of the stuff of why he's there, what's going on, and maybe it unlocks a lot of information. But is he just not going to interact with people? I mean, I want him to interact with Lady True. I want to see him come back. I mean, she's got the bust of him as Jeremy Irons. It's fantastic. That's right.
Yeah, that's really good. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I think that we're going to have to get a Laurie Blake, Dr. Manhattan interaction.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would be foolish of them not to do that.
I would agree.
Does Angela need to interact with Dr. Manhattan? Not really.
Technically, no, but I think that'd be an interesting way then to bridge the two different generations of vigilantes, essentially. So you're originally with the group the Watchmen, and then moving forward to Angela and Red Scare and Looking Glass and everybody. But do you believe that Veidt will actually be dead by the end of this series, or do you think he will very much be alive? And
I don't think they're going to kill off Jeremy Irons.
I completely agree with you.
I think that he survives. I think the last man standing will be Adrian Veidt.
Yeah, that's very true as well, and I think he will. I think he will have an important role here in the actual present day before this series concludes. So I think we will get some of those interactions. And again, he's still the best part of the show, so it was really disappointing that he wasn't in this, although there's really no place for him in this bottle episode. There's not.
But I was just super excited that there's a trial next week, and it looks great.
All
the people are clones, and everybody's a clone, and pay attention to the judge, because the judge to me looks like, the gamekeeper looks like Phillips.
Okay, I'll have to go back. I watched the little preview snippet. I still didn't think he looks all that much like Phillips.
Maybe I'm wrong.
No, I'll go back and rewatch it. More specifically, I'll go back and rewatch the ending of the episode with Veidt, where the game warden arrests him, essentially, to go put him on trial. Because they have some close-ups there. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Anything else to add on this one?
No, I don't think so, man.
Well, we do want to thank you guys for joining us tonight, episode 6. We'll be back next Monday as well with episode 7. I don't know what the title of that is. I know it's out, I'm sure. If you guys like what you're hearing, or you guys have questions, comments, you think we're right about something, you think we're wrong about something, let us know. You can, tweet us at Alien and Cowboy. You can email us at aliensandcowboys@gmail.com. As always, you can always catch us again here for the Watchmen for Nixon podcast. You can always catch us weekly, or generally bi-weekly going forward now, just until this particular podcast is done, at the Aliens and Cowboys podcast, where we break down just pop culture. We've been really talking a lot of Star Wars stuff recently. Because of the holiday, we're probably not going to get together this upcoming week.
Yep,
we should be back the following week. Nelly, one of our other people that joins us on that podcast every once in a while, he's watching Star Wars for the first time. Yeah. Joe needs to talk about The Mandalorian. And obviously the Boba Fett sightings that have been twice, and Boba Fett exists in that conspiracy of that show. And Joe and I are disagreeing on that, of course. So we do like you guys' keep listening, hit the subscribe button, give us a rating if you can. It helps people find us. We have great international following. It looks like we get a lot of traction, a lot of really neat countries, so we're really excited about that. So let us know what you guys think. Leave us a rating, 5 stars, and we'll see you guys next week. Cheers.
Cheers.